This narrative embodies themes of bravery, sacrifice, and resilience, inscribed in the historical records of America. The Battle of Little Bighorn, which took place on June 25, 1876, along the banks of the Little Bighorn River in the Montana Territory, represented a significant confrontation between differing cultures and military forces, ultimately altering the trajectory of the Wild West. Amidst the turmoil and devastation, a determined group of soldiers fought valiantly for their survival, honor, and nation. Sergeant Stanislaus Roy was present during this pivotal moment, and he provides a first-hand account of the most brutal engagement of the Great Sioux War, conveyed with stark honesty and deep emotion. We invite you to delve into the essence of warfare, where the echoes of gunfire and cries of anguish still resonate across the Montana plains, and the spirit of the American warrior remains eternal. Therefore, we encourage you to settle in and join us on this captivating exploration. As you view this video, please remember to click the like button and subscribe to our channel to support our community. On June 5th, we found ourselves caught in a snowstorm between Heart River and O'Fallon Creek, enduring extremely cold conditions. Roy recounts that the wagon train only reached Powder River and did not proceed to Rosebud before turning back. We encountered Indian graves in a hollow situated between Miles City and Rosebud, where Reno rejoined us after his scouting mission near Foot Kyo. Between that location and Rosebud, we discovered a low-lying area adorned with Indian graves nestled among the trees. The men of G Troop dismantled these graves, taking what they desired and discarding the bones into the Yellowstone River. Some of the soldiers cautioned McIntosh that G Troop might come to regret their actions. As we continued along the Rosebud, we observed that Indian ponies had grazed the grass completely off both sides of the trail for an extended distance. Roy recounts that on the 22nd, we departed from camp at noon and proceeded eastward into the woods, approximately a mile from the mouth of Rosebud. We traversed the hill, reached the river, and crossed it, remaining on the western bank. It appears that Custer took a similar path, which is now indicated by the road. Roy has always heard that Bob Jackson and Billy Cross did not cross at Fort, and no one recalls seeing them during the Valley Fight or on the western side of the river. There is roughly 50 yards of timber along the western bank of Fort A. Reno's advance consisted of companies G, A, and M in that sequence. After we crossed the ford, we established a line, and while positioning ourselves, I overheard some of the men remarking that Custer was visible. We could see him on the hills to our right across the river. We dismounted about 200 yards in front of the timber, and the skirmish line moved forward to the edge of the woods. Company G was positioned on the right, followed by Company A, with Company M on the left. Roy is certain that there was no timber to the right of our line. Some Native Americans were located in the woods ahead of the right flank of the skirmish line, firing at us from an oblique angle toward the southwest. The skirmish line extended westward from the timber's edge, contrary to my markings on the map. Roy observed Charlie Reynolds, who was wounded and dismounted, attempting to follow the retreating troops with his musket in hand. After my horse was injured, it became uncontrollable, but it managed to carry me through. We received orders to withdraw from the skirmish line and moved about 50 yards into the timber to retrieve our horses. I spotted Wallace, mounted and leading G Troop out. I inquired about the location of my horse, and Wallace advised me to take any horse available and leave the area promptly. We all exited from the southern edge of the timber. Roy believes he was positioned on the skirmish line for approximately 20 minutes, during which he discharged around 20 rounds and observed ravines toward the hill filled with Indians, firing at an angle to the line. He also spotted Indians across the river, opposite the timber, maneuvering eastward through the trees. Upon my entry, I noticed Gilbert emerging from the timber with 4 horses, one of which belonged to me. I mounted my horse and urged Gilbert to follow us. I was positioned behind Gilbert and exited the timber rather late. Approximately 75 to 100 yards from the timber, I encountered Charlie Reynolds, who was wounded and dismounted, bravely standing his ground. Shortly thereafter, my horse was shot in the jaw, just behind the mouth. The horse collapsed but quickly regained its feet, allowing me to mount again. When the horse fell, my sling belt flew over my head, causing me to lose my carbine, leaving me with only my revolver. I managed to reach the river safely, where the water was about belly deep for the horse. I immediately began ascending the bluff. My horse was bleeding profusely, so I had to leave him behind as I climbed. I overheard others mentioning that Reno would join Custer, and I informed Moylan that I was dismounted. He advised me to find a horse, which I was eager to do, as being on foot would be perilous if the command needed to retreat. About 10 minutes after reaching the top of the bluff, Benteen arrived, and we discussed the possibility of joining Custer. I then mentioned my need for a horse to Moylan. I returned halfway down to the river and retrieved my horse. Not long after, Benteen reappeared, and we ventured out, only to be pursued by two warriors. Intense gunfire continued until nightfall. King sustained injuries on the evening of the 25th. On the evening of the 25th, we constructed breastworks. Once the gunfire ceased, Reno approached Moylan and requested a non-commissioned officer to volunteer for the task of leading 6 men to serve as pickets in front of Company A's position. Moylan called upon several non-commissioned officers to step forward, but Hayne was injured, Feller declined, and McDermott was required as first sergeant instead of Easley, who had been on guard the previous night. Moylan then turned to me, and I agreed to take on the responsibility if I could secure volunteers to accompany me. The privates who stepped forward were Connor, Gilbert, Bancroft, McClurg, and Harris. Another individual initially volunteered, but withdrew at the last moment. I informed Reno that I would take one of the men for one relief shift. After gathering the volunteers, I approached Reno for further instructions. He advised me to have the men exit one at a time, as the Sioux were still moving about, and their presence was distinctly audible. He instructed that 2 men should remain awake at all times, engaging in conversation to prevent drowsiness, as we were all quite fatigued. If the Indians commenced firing early the following morning, we were to disperse and make our way to the breastworks, but not as a group. We executed the picket duty as directed, and at dawn, when the Sioux opened fire, we retreated to our line in a safe and orderly manner. My captain praised me for my performance that night. The fighting began at dawn on June 26th and was intense until around 10 a.m. We witnessed hundreds of Indians riding around us like racehorses, their gunfire so heavy that it stripped the sagebrush in front of us. A light rain fell around noon on the 26th, and the men utilized their ponchos to collect some water, though not in significant amounts. On the morning of June 26th, F.C. Mann, a civilian packer, was killed while positioned behind a breastwork on Company A's line, aiming his carbine over the top at a height of approximately 3 feet. After approximately 20 minutes in that position, someone realized that something was amiss. Upon investigation, they discovered him lifeless, concealed within the temple, having been killed instantly. He remained in his stance, still aiming his musket. Around 11 a.m. on June 26th, we retrieved additional deceased horses and extended our line toward Benteen's position, thereby enhancing the protection for our men. In my view, Benteen was instrumental in saving the command. He exhibited remarkable bravery and composure. We were experiencing intense thirst, with some resorting to chewing grass to stimulate saliva. Cowley succumbed to madness from dehydration and required restraint on June 26th. Following Benteen's charge, the demand for water became urgent, particularly among the wounded. Some enlisted men proposed volunteering to fetch water from the river. The officers concurred and 19 men stepped forward, but the officers deemed that number excessive and opted for 12 volunteers instead. Each man carried 2 canteens in 6 2-gallon camp kettles. Sergeant Feller and 4 other sharpshooters had a vantage point on the west bank, preventing the Indians from gathering there. Nevertheless, numerous Indians lingered along the riverbank, poised to fire at anyone attempting to access water. As we descended from the bluff, we had to sprint across an open area approximately 100 yards wide to reach the ravine's entrance. From that point to the river, we remained concealed from the Sioux. Upon reaching the ravine's mouth, we spotted Indians in the brush on the opposite bank, but we refrained from firing to avoid provoking a confrontation. The ravine was situated about 20 yards from the water. Madden from K Troop was the 3rd individual to dash for water and was struck, resulting in a broken leg. Despite being a large, heavy man and in considerable pain, he managed to crawl back to safety. He requested to be left behind, believing he would be secure, and was later carried back before nightfall. The water retrieval team included Roy, Gilbert, Madden, Wilbur from M Troop, Bancroft, Harris, Voigt, Peter Thompson, Golden, Tanner, and Coleman from B Troop. Roy is uncertain about the last three names mentioned. I was the fifth individual to rush for water. In the ravine, we counted off and agreed that each person could decide whether to go for water when their name was called. The first man, whose name I cannot recall, returned with a full kettle, and we all took a drink, our first in 36 hours. I believe Wilbur was the fourth to go, and he sustained injuries. After Madden was shot, he managed to crawl back, and we provided him with water and care. There was then a pause of approximately half an hour before anyone ventured for water again. We spent about an hour in the ravine collecting water. We hurried to the river, filled the kettle, and then filled our canteens from it. The return trip to the top of the hill with the water took us about an hour and a half, during which Lieutenant Varnum was assigned to guard it. Dr. Porter distributed water to the wounded, but it was insufficient to satisfy their thirst. The battle persisted, but the Native Americans reduced their fire and retreated as evening approached. That night, we dug pits leading to the river to secure our water supply and managed to bring up ample water for the men. Scout Frederick, Bill Jackson, Lieutenant DeRudio, and Tom O'Neill joined us that night. I heard DeRudio call out a greeting. In the guard, George Botava Troop challenged him. DeRudio confirmed his identity, and the officer on duty permitted him to come closer. We were filled with joy, having feared they were dead. We had observed Indians leaving the valley on the evening of June 26th, but we suspected it might have been a ruse. On the morning of June 27th, we took the horses down to the water, and it was a heartbreaking sight to see them plunge their heads into the water, drinking eagerly. The 7th Infantry arrived and set up camp at the bottom, near the location where McIntosh was killed. The officers from Gibbon's command generously shared their sugar, lemons, and other comforts with our wounded. On the 28th, I was assigned the grim task of euthanizing about 20 wounded horses that had been left behind along the bluffs during our retreat on June 25th. Some of the horses had sustained injuries during the conflict on Reno Hill and had strayed away. On the morning of June 28th, we proceeded to the Custer battlefield to inter the deceased. We transported our injured to a camp located in a village across from the battlefield. Some individuals rode horses while approximately 30 had to be carried on blankets by hand with assistance from the infantry. We established a skirmish line and buried the fallen. Following what we believed to be Custer's path, we discovered the first body, that of Corporal John Foley from C Company. I recognized him immediately due to his bald head and black hair. He was a middle-aged man and well acquainted to me. Foley's remains were situated at least 3/4 of a mile ahead of the main cluster of bodies at sea. The next body we encountered was that of Sergeant Butler, positioned about halfway between Foley and the main group at sea. There were no deceased horses found near either Foley or Butler. I assisted in burying the bodies on the western slope of the ridge and concluded the task with the E Troop personnel near the gully. The odor was unbearable, prompting me to go to the river for a drink to ease my nausea. I hope this personal account provides you with a fresh perspective on the Battle of Little Bighorn in the Great Sioux War of 1876. Stay tuned for more videos of this nature. I look forward to sharing additional first-hand accounts of various battles. Wishing you a wonderful day, and I will see you next time.